you've learned things that normally one to learn would need a teacher. Like energy, the chi. You've learned to master energetic output, like where you move your energy, how to expand your energy. Inner chi, currents of chi. I can see why they'd say you'd need a teacher for whatever this is. There's also a massive energetic output and expansion that you have that only certain masters have acquired. Certain things that you should not know, that you would need a master to learn, you have been divinely shown. And this had something to do with why this darker energy respects you. You're very advanced. You've learned to move your energy and like create things that are necessary to bouncing back certain attacks with your energy. But in order to do this, normally somebody needs to have some type of master, along with how you mastered this and why you may be being observed by certain organizations. It's like this is giving the CIA going, how is this person's aura and energy like this? You have multiple things showing up in your energy that you shouldn't have access to, that would have taken a long time for the average individual to learn with a master, yet you didn't. You didn't have a master other than the divine. Like you didn't have a teacher of this. I don't know if you've been seeing, like dreaming of this, or if you've been studying this, maybe reading up on this. And I'm not exactly sure what entirely I'm looking at, and maybe you don't know either, you just know you can do it. You can just feel the energy surge through your being, and you can feel it be added to your aura. You can feel the output of it. And how you learn this is unknown to the individuals that have been monitoring you. That you have not only alchemized, but had added to your energetic output, to like, this is so hard to explain, to what you're capable of doing. And it's beyond the limit of what they had observed on this planet, pertaining to what it would take to stop the divine movement, stop the rise of Christ consciousness and the ascension. None of what they had documented from what they had observed worked on you. So whatever was conjured, whatever was called upon, whatever was being worked on, blew up in their face because of the level that you have reached. So if they documented, like if it was documented, the most ascended being had reached a level 20, if we're going to use an analogy. You had far exceeded that level 20. Your energy is unable to be registered. So it could be that you have skyrocketed into a level 50, one that they do not have reports on, one that they have not observed or seen or been able to monitor and find a weakness to.
But there seems to be a level that's beyond Nevuah. It's the Torah of the Nun Sharebina. And that Torah comes through Haskalah, not Nevuah, because there's no Messiah to the Mashiach. So therefore, it comes from Haskalah. And that's the ability to know certain things that Nevuah can't even tell you. And that's why he's greater than Moshe Rabbeinu, because he is the actual Mashiach, and he's completely imbued with the concept, the process of Haskalah, and therefore he knows everything that he knows, the whole 50th gate, without even learning it from anyone. See, the Mashiach, the strange thing about the Mashiach, what it says in the Yaskiladi, that in a certain sense the Mashiach does not have a Rebbe. That's what it means. Every Gadol and everyone in Klal Yisrael had a Rebbe. The only one who did not have a Rebbe was Moshe Rabbeinu. But even he had a Rebbe. His Rebbe was God. I mean, through a process called Nevuah. But the Mashiach does not even have a Rebbe from God through Nevuah. He has a Rebbe with God through Haskalah. He replicated the process of knowing something through Haskalah, which means he not only knew it because God told him, but he could actually figure it out because of his relationship with the Shekhinah.
The way that everything was thrown, every amount of suffering and every type of abuse was thrown into your reality to make sure you would never reach level 20. And not only did you reach level 20, you surpassed it. Without a teacher. The only teacher you have is the Most High God. And you released in silence. You purged in silence. I'm not saying that you had anybody else to rely on to understand your suffering and to completely reprogram your subconscious and shift your perception entirely. The amount of work you have done is absolutely astronomically amazing. Your entire journey, like stairs. The way that it took in your eyes, it may have taken so long to get here, but you have done this faster than any other being these individuals have studied. Any other being that they have monitored. And not only have you done this faster, you've exceeded what had been registered and documented of the heights that they perceived humanity being limited to. Because nobody has reached where you have. And it's like it's giving the family that has been created. where you have assisted other light workers with the way you traverse this path, with doing it easier, ascending easier, because the codes are now here. There are light workers picking up the codes that you have integrated. Malicious intentions. It's giving somebody wants to know what you know in order to maintain or obtain a certain position with the power you hold. Be careful who you give access to your energetic information. Because a lot of individuals want to know how you went beyond the limits. How you became this infinite, limitless being. And this, normally, again, this is something that people have to go to therapy to work on. I'm not saying that you really had to do that. So not only did you not have a teacher to teach you the energetic arts, but you didn't have some other individual outside of yourself and your divine team to help you break this down so you would be able to reprogram your subconscious, to shift completely out of any timeline that could have been resurrected or pulled in. The things that you went through were intended to break you physically, psychologically, spiritually. It is almost giving the Truman Show, but in a very twisted, distorted way, because of the anomaly your energy registered as on these organizations, networks, and societies and fallen angel bloodlines radar. This is another reason why Mama Gaia is celebrating you. Because you did what should have been impossible. You did things without, other than the Most High being your teacher, without a teacher to show you all of this. You had things downloaded that you knew instantly that were necessary, that the more that you worked upon what was downloaded, the stronger it got. Whatever ability had been activated, the more that you used it, the stronger it got. As well as alchemizing the energy directed towards you and adding it to where it needed to be added within the gifts that have been activated. A lot of people don't know how to do this. They don't know how to alchemize specific energy and then put it in a specific place within their system. There are a lot of individuals that know how to alchemize energy, but not be specific with it, with where they know they need to place it. You are. And you anticipate the attacks before they even happen. God gave you incredible gifts. Incredible gifts. But all of these gifts you've used for humanity, which is what the divine trusted you to do. This is why this entity, I wouldn't say an ally, but is working on your behalf and is putting in work right now. All beings, whether neutral or dark, do not have an effect on you at this time. Why they see you and respect you. Why there are so many returns happening. Positive returns and negative returns. Reversals and returns of what is yours, what has been freed. What these individuals have now been limited from obtaining. And what has been added to your soul contract on this planet. It's like the more you evolve, the more of your soul contract was unlocked. Like, let me explain this. With this soul contract, more could be added, depending on where you evolved, how far you ascended. And at first, it was like your alignment from here to here. I'm seeing the soul contract like this, where you would complete this, you would release this, and you would be here. And this is where your contract had been limited, pertaining to the work you were willing to do here. Your contract, your divine contract has been added to. There's been more unlocked of your divine contract and your experiences with how you've ascended. Of course, with the divine and the Most High's protection, we were not one to be fucked with. But again, it was a part of our evolutionary process. It was boot camp. We were meant to go up against these entities. At this level, there are beings that, with your rank, with the energy you're emanating, the moment that they go to approach you, your energy signifies, I am untouchable. Basically, bow in my presence. Like, don't come up, don't show yourself in my presence. That is what your energy is giving. With everything, it's like you're being honored by spirit because of everything you've overcome, the way your soul contract has unfolded, and the upgrades that you have gone through and are currently going through. You're being kept in a state of softness, which lets me know that there are beings that are being redirected that were meant to disrupt your peace that are not being allowed to. Your peace right now is a priority. You keep unlocking things you shouldn't be able to do or know. And this is only the beginning. Doesn't matter what they do, what they try. They will never be able to stop you. They will never be able to redirect your blessings, your benefits, and your destiny to their experience. They will never be able to beat you. Never. And they're learning this quick. They will never be able to fully understand your infinite abilities and why you are this respected in the spirit, other than the Most High. They will have to watch you be blessed in the presence of your enemies. And they will have to continue watching you change the world in the way that you were supposed to. This is true Earth. And you as a revolutionary frontliner and light leader are meant to lead the charge into everything.
So clearly one of the important ideas is of Mashiach ben Yosef. You know, the ability to perceive and understand what is the correct path, the path of holiness, you know, or the desire of holiness, you know. Because in the end, that's the task. To what extent will you put aside yourself and recognize that the only meaning in life is a direction that leads to God's will? That's really that's the gist really of the entire Veda, you see. Because one of the things that God requires, and we don't really know why, but one of the things that He requires is that God has a fundamental character trait, if you want to call that word, character trait, and that is He's a true cause. That means God actually causes something to happen, and without Him doing it, it wouldn't have happened. Well, what God wants us is to cause the future world, right? And that is, in many ways, a characteristic that only God has. Cause, true cause, and so on. So when you repent, right, so you are now causing a change of mind, and that is godlike, to be able to actually cause. God doesn't force you to do tshuva, repent, you do that. But that means it's a change of mindset. You become a cause for the opposite way of believing and so on. Now, to get into the idea of Mashiach, you have to understand there's a certain type of character, or I should say a group of people. They're called the Sovlei Chayloim. Sovlei Chayloim means they suffer illnesses. But they suffer illnesses not for their own sake. They suffer for other people, you see. Now, it's not clear how that works, really, because their suffering was have to do with the other guy. He's not suffering. But because the Jews are really one entity, of which we don't really understand, there is a mechanism, a way of one person or being to suffer for another being, since that being itself is really one with you. Now, we don't really have a clear understanding, but people who take on this suffering for others to alleviate the magnitude of suffering of others, they are called the Sovlei Chayloim. They suffer the illness and they take part in alleviating the suffering of the Jewish people, right? They actually bring atonement to other people. One of the conditions of being that member of that group, okay, there is a condition that you cannot deserve the suffering on your own, because why would it go for somebody else? It already has to go for you. You see, so we're talking about very righteous people, you see, that suffer, but they suffer for others. And they can only do so because they really have a very minimal amount to suffer for their own sins. So really they have to be tzaddikim, you see, and we see that. Now what's interesting is that when you do suffer for others, the reward is infinite. We cannot even begin to fathom the amount of reward a person will have in order to alleviate the sufferings of the Jewish people. We can't. It's beyond our comprehension, right? And that's the assist of the Sovlei Chayloim. The greatest of the Sovlei Chayloim that the Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto certainly brings down is Moshe Rabbeinu, which is strange, and the two Mashiachim, two Messiahs, Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David, right? They are the top of the list. So I want to talk a little about the sufferings of the Mashiach ben Yosef, which to a certain extent includes Mashiach ben David, but the one who apparently suffers much more is the Mashiach ben Yosef. You see, yeah. This is where we see it. You see, that God said at the end of time, He said to Mashiach ben Yosef at the beginning of time, right, that in the end of time, your children, means Klal Yisrael, Jewish people, will not make it. They're going to all perish. Where we see, all of a sudden, Mashiach ben Yosef now begins the parsha, as they say, the journey of being one of the greatest of the Sovlei Chayloim. Because look what he said, take on everybody's necessity of atonement. I mean, it's amazing. Did he have any idea what that means? Anyway, the Medrash says that God said, okay. You know, of course, The reason why God said that, because he wanted Mashiach ben Yosef to accept the suffering, you see. And fortunately for us, he did. So then it says that God took an oil barzel, a yoke of iron, and he put it on top of him. You know, it's like you ever see these yokes on top of oxen? Mashiach ben Yosef's symbol is an ox, and so on. Anyway, so Mashiach ben Yosef bowed his head because it was enormous weight, and therefore the suffering of Mashiach ben Yosef was terrible. Mashiach ben David also suffers by being denied the proper closeness or attachment to God, but that suffering is the nishama of the Mashiach ben David. But Mashiach ben Yosef, he says, he suffers as a person, right? That there's a real person that is born and he lives amongst us and he goes through tremendous suffering. See, that's a tremendous difference between the two types of sufferings, although they both suffer, because you can suffer even as a neshama by being denied that type of greatness that you really deserve because of your acts and in terms of who you are and so on, you see. Wait a minute, if that's the case, then what does it mean that he suffers? Mashiach ben Yosef, a long time ago, right, is what are the weapons of the Mashiach ben Yosef? And there is a pasuk at the end of the Chumash where it says, B'chor Shoroi, the firstborn of his ox. These are the blessings that Moshe Rabbeinu gave the Shvatim, the tribes. And the one he gave Shevet Yosef, okay, is the following. B'chor Shoroi, the firstborn of his ox, Hodoloi, beauty is his, right? But the horns are the horns of a ram. It's like, not the horns of an ox. And then it says, Ubehem, and with these horns, Ami Minagach, he will gore the nations. Who's the firstborn of the ox? That is the tribe of Yosef. It's Mashiach ben Yosef. Okay? Hodoloi. He's beautiful. He has a tremendous look of enormous beauty. Wherein does the beauty lie? Right? And the answer is the Kani Re'im. He doesn't have the horns of an ox, which is what? Which is short, very powerful, because the ox in general has very powerful shoulders and so on. But it's the horns of a Re'im. If you ever take a look at some goats, some of their horns are magnificent. The symmetry, the way they're shaped and so on. You know, there's many creatures that have beautiful looking horns. In fact, people cut them off. They put them on their wall as trophies and so on, you see. So the pasuk says that the horns of this ox, Mashiach ben Yosef, is what? Is the horns of a ram. And Hodoloi, it's beautiful to look at. And with these horns, he will gore the nations. Horns is weapons. That's what it's used for, that emanate from the head. Well, that tells us that the weapons of the Mashiach ben Yosef is chokhmah, wisdom. This is the hallmark of the Mashiach ben Yosef. Unparalleled chokhmah, wisdom. And it emanates from his head, which is the wisdom that emanates from his head is unbelievably powerful, and it's like a certain type of ore, light. And with this light, he will gore the nations. The nations will be astonished at this wisdom. That is the weapons of the Mashiach ben Yosef. His chokhmah, his ability to know secrets, you see, of which is not known by people, certainly by Jewish people, and so on. Tremendous amount of knowledge and so on. That's called the Kani Re'im, the horns of the Re'im. Right. That's his weapons. And that in many ways is not only that, but it's that wisdom, that insight, spectacular understanding that is beyond our understanding. And by the way, that is the Messianic light. Right. he has that wisdom. Therefore, at the end of time, Mashiach ben Yosef consists of several nishamas. What does that mean? In every generation, there is always a nishama of Mashiach ben Yosef. The shirish, the neshama of the Mashiach, is what's called, he has a yisoid, he has a foundational neshama, okay? And then that foundational neshama gives rise to what's called a spark, a shirish, you see. And that shirish connects to the real Mashiach, the Yechidah. The shirish neshama of the Mashiach ben Yosef was Yosef HaTzadik, the Yisoid. He enters the generation of the Mashiach himself. That means in every generation there is some type of neshama called a shirish, a root, and that enters a person, and he, if the generation is worthy, can become Mashiach ben Yosef. But that's only because he has a shirish. He has to be a candidate, okay? But if he does become Mashiach ben Yosef, then he is joined with the neshama of Yosef HaTzadik. So within him you now have not only the shirish, which makes him a candidate, but he also has, right, the Yisoid neshama of Yosef HaTzadik. Then, but he's still not Mashiach. Then if he becomes Mashiach in that generation, really becomes Mashiach, because that's the generation that Mashiach comes, then the Yechidah, by the way, that Yechidah of Adam Harishon, which originally left Adam, and it's the only aspect of the neshama that was never contaminated, split, when it left Adam. So one half of that Yechidah goes into this person who will become Mashiach, that half Yechidah of Adam Rishon, and joins with these other parts. And that's what makes a Mashiach. It's the Yechidah of one half of the Yechidah of Adam Harishon that joins together, you see, with the Yisoid, which is Yosef HaTzadik, and the Shirish, okay, then he becomes Mashiach. And the same thing is what happens with Mashiach ben David. Now, why do they need a Yechidah? Because the Yechidah is the entry to the divine presence, to the Shekhinah. And that's what brings down this unbelievable awe, insight of the Messianic light. And therefore all of us, since the Yechidah of Adam Rishon was a collective Yechidah of all Jews, that means when the Mashiach ben David or ben Yosef has the Yechidah of Adam Rishon, then all of us will experience the Mashiach, right? Because he's got our Yechidah, and he becomes what's called the conduit of everybody now activating their own Yechidah. Mashiach ben Yosef, the horns of the Re'im, they are really the Yechidah of the Adam Harishon. At the end of time, and that's when the Akedah is the last test, at the end of time, the Jews were not going to be making it. That's exactly what God said. You see, that the Jews won't make it, and you need the suffering of Mashiach ben Yosef to do it. But we now understand, if the Mashiach ben Yosef suffers, how? And the answer is, it has to be through his horns, which is his wisdom, that he cannot express his wisdom. And that's how we see what the suffering of the Mashiach ben Yosef is. And that it's inability, tremendous inability to express his chokhmah. Now you may say, wait a minute, is there any other place that we see this? Because what I'm doing is telling you about allusions to this. The Akedah, the ram entangled in its horns, the Kani Ra'im, right? The horns of the ram, by the blessing by Moshe Rabbeinu of the Shevet of Yosef, and so on, you know? And this is what I'm saying, and that the Mashiach ben Yosef suffers, and the answer is yes, there is. There's somebody who actually says this openly. In fact, I've never seen this anywhere else except in this sefer. This sefer, the name of the sefer is called, and you can look it up actually, it's called Neflois HaYehudi, The Wonders of the Yehudi. Now there was a very great Hasidic Rebbe called the Yehudi HaKodesh. Famous, very famous. He was obviously a very holy person. The Yehudi HaKodesh, the holy Jew, which is obviously what they call him, you know. He was the Rebbe of many Hasidic Rebbes after him, the Yehudi HaKodesh and so on, right? And he was part of the Hasidus of the Baal Shem Tov and so on. Anyway, he wrote a sefer called Neflois HaYehudi. And one of the pieces in that sefer, he says something which is incredible. He actually described, the Yehudi HaKodesh describes the suffering of the Mashiach ben Yosef. Now we already have an idea of what that is. That there's something wrong with his ability to fathom information, thinking. But here's the problem, is that when he's having that difficulty or that blockage, he has the shirish of Mashiach ben Yosef. Can you imagine the pain of a person that has this incredible potential of wisdom, that he very hard to think, and here's the way he describes it. Let me tell you what he says. He says the Mashiach ben Yosef is a person that he sits down to learn, let's say Sunday, right? He sits down to learn Torah, right? On Monday, so let's assume he covers a certain amount of information. So on Monday, right, he forgets basically everything he learned on Sunday. So he's got to start all over again on Monday. On Tuesday, right, he sits down to learn, because remember, he is the shirish, root soul of Mashiach ben Yosef. He has unbelievable spiritual potential, and he forgets what he learned on Sunday and Monday. So you got to relearn it. And this happens all the time, for years. So clearly what we're witnessing here is an inability to learn. Yet he has the nishama, or the shirish of Mashiach ben Yosef. Can we begin to imagine his pain? Can you imagine, I'll give you just an example. Imagine a person of the capacity of the Vilna Gaon, right? And he's got this incredible head, obviously. Could you imagine if all of a sudden he's struck with some type of altering disease that blocks him from thinking, you see? Or he has real memory problems. Could you imagine a person of that nature, of that potential, not able to learn, yet he's still the Vilna Gaon in terms of a spiritual capacity, right? And his spiritual abilities? No, you cannot even imagine. And imagine if he had to endure that for decades. What would he look like when he's 70 years old? He'd be a basket case. It's obvious. How can a person possibly endure with that level of neshama and that ability to know, to think, and so on, to learn, to achieve tremendous Torah knowledge, that he's completely blocked? Now that doesn't mean he's an Amoritz, no, because there is probably some information that does remain with him, and there is a very slow accumulation. But we're talking about the Vilna Gaon. That person, think about that. Think about that person with this potential, all of a sudden is blocked. That he keeps forgetting, forget about photographic memory, he keeps forgetting, right, what he learned again and again, right? But he's the Vilna Gaon. He has that type of neshama, of unbelievable capacity for greatness. This is what the Mashiach ben Yosef goes through. Now, I don't know what the capacity of Mashiach ben Yosef is, but it has to be extraordinary enough, right, where this will give him unbelievable pain, obviously, or else what's the whole point, right? So this is what the Neflois HaYehudi says. You see, now why, not only we can begin to understand what this man goes through, that he can't learn, and he's always forgetting, and any of his chidushim is forgotten. I mean, could you imagine the frustration? It's terrible, and he has to go through this year after year, because that's how long it takes to undo all the suffering of the Jews for thousands of years. Okay, I understand the pain is incredible, but why this type? And the answer is because that is the specialty of the Mashiach ben Yosef, is the horns of the Re'im. That is his specialty. That's what separates him from everybody else, his incredible capacity to learn. But why does it atone? And the answer is because one of the greatest things that Klal Yisrael omits is Bittul Torah. This is an undoing of the chet, of not really learning enough Torah. So when you learn and you can't figure it out, right, that's pain that you have, that I can't figure it out, I don't understand, atones for your Bittul Torah, from the fact that you have not learned Torah, because you want it so much, right, but it's not happening. So that's an undoing of the fact that you could have learned, didn't. So this is an undoing. You'll want to learn, and you can't. You see, that's why in many ways it is a bittul, it's an undoing kapora for all the Torah that we could have learned. And I'm sure we all could have learned more than we learned so on, right? And that's the greatest of the chatoim, is that we're not engaged in the Torah the way we should have. So that explains the nature of that particular kind of yisurin, or suffering. But this is incredible when you think about that here's a person that has to undergo something which is completely against his nature, which is unbelievable, right? In order to help the Jewish people, and he is the Sovlei Choiloim. But that is punishment or suffering number one. Guess what? There's more to come. There's something else that he has, Mashiach ben Yosef. Because the Mashiach ben Yosef not only has the capacity to know, to learn ideas at the highest level, but what he also has the capacity is his ruchnius, his dvekus. Could you imagine the kedusha, the holiness of this Mashiach ben Yosef? Imagine, and I'll just let you imagine. Imagine a person who has unbelievable koyach, capacity for righteousness, for kedusha. I mean, just think of any of the great rebbes, right? And their capacity for spirituality, right? And then imagine all of a sudden they are blocked from even approaching a millimeter of that kedusha. So you're going to say to me, how in the world does that happen, right? Believe me, it can happen in man's, health and so on. People go through all kinds of trials and tribulations where they are forced in many ways, and I'll say the word, to sin, right? And I will show you what all this means. That all of a sudden, Mashiach ben Yosef is not only blocked with his capacity to be a tremendous goyin in learning and so on, because that's what he's supposed to do for the Jewish people, but he's blocked in his ability to be an incredible, not only tzaddik, but kodosh, holy person, which means dvekus, to be close to God. Yet there's something in him, you can look at it as a phenomenal Yetzer Hara. One of the Shvatim, one of the greatest of the Shvatim. So the Medrash says an incredible thing, that a God all of a sudden spoke to the angel, right, of Taiva, right, especially with women, right, and he said to the angel, fire up. You need to take away his free will. I took away your free will. You had no choice. There was no way you could fight the Malach, right? Obviously, the Malach turned up his hormones, and that was the end of it, and finished. But wait a minute, what does that tell us? It means that somebody in the Parsha of Mashiach can be forced to sin. Even though it looks like a sin, but he can actually be forced to sin where he has no free will. Yet maybe he thinks that he did have free will. And he will now feel terrible, right? He didn't know God took away his free will, you see? So what do we see? That this is something that can be given to somebody who has the aside, basically, of Mashiach. It can destroy his ruchnius. I mean, imagine some famous tzaddik or some famous rebbe that committed a terrible sin of what's called hashchosa or zima or whatever, immorality and so on. But he doesn't know that God took it away, the free will. Could you imagine the suffering that he would have with this person who has this type of neshama? You see, you now have a world of what's called geshem, physicality, and zoyama. Zoyama is the force or the projection, of the Yetzer Hara into the physical world. You see, that's the second reality. So you still have Yetzer Hara, right? But he's now part of you. So there's certain things that changed. Once he became part of you, he's no longer outside of you trying to tempt you to sin. He's now giving you drives and urges to sin. Well, the Yetzer Hara is fundamentally an entity that destroys, that decomposes living things, the forces, and also inorganic things. How does it manifest? Because what happened was that since the Yetzer Hara now invades your world, right, you decompose. Ultimately, that is what death is. Death is nothing more than the decomposition of living material. So now all things decompose. The ability of physical matter to decompose is the manifestation of the Yetzer Hara in the physical world. But besides that, this world essentially is energy. Once Adam ate from the tree, he introduced the Yetzer Hara a new reality, where the Yetzer Hara now invades you through the force called the Zayama. You see? And therefore, he now exercises his properties, which is Zayama, and that decomposes living matter and also destroys energy. You see? See, that's the manifestation of the Satan in our world. As long as the Satan was on the outside, you see, so he could not share anything that you were privy to at all. But once the Satan became part of you, then all of a sudden things changed. Now what did change is before Adam ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, what was his job? Well, the reality was there was no Yetzer Hara in him. So his job was basically ignore the advice of the Satan, which Chava should have done. She should have ignored the advice, the Satanic advice, to defy God by eating from that tree. That's all. But now that the Yetzer Hara has entered your physical body, the avodah, the service, is no longer to ignore the advice, right? Because he's part of you. What you have to do is expel the Satan. It's a different avodah. God issues forth, and they're the spheres, a divine flow of spiritual energy. So the Rebbe Hashem came over to the Satan and cut the cable, which instantly means that the flow of energy stops to the Satan. So before the Satan evaporates, whatever, he takes the edge of the cable of the Satan and he connects it to man, you see. So it's incredible. Now all mankind, mankind has what? Has a cable that comes down through which the divine energy flows. One part goes into mankind, Adam, the other part goes into the Satan. So it comes out that they're both vying for the same energy because they both need it to exist. What determines the flow? And the answer is man, not the Satan. What does that mean? If mankind does the will of God, so the flow goes to him of divine energy, and he exists continuously and flourishes tremendously. And what happens to the Satan? The energy goes to man and not the Satan, you see? So the Satan grows weak. In fact, the whole side of evil grows weak, and he begins to falter. And eventually, if all mankind takes away the energy from the Satan, then he dies, which means he's expelled from the human reality, from the entire physical universe. But since he's part of you, right, and you're bringing down the energy, what happens if you sin? So the energy that mankind was supposed to get now goes to the Satan, because he's part of you. If it goes to the Satan, then mankind begins to diminish, to falter, you see. And if mankind continuously sins, then mankind is doomed to die, because he needs that energy. So the Satan has to be unique from your energy. You know what Mashiach ben Yosef really did? He created a new form. What did I say? A new form of relationship with the Satan. The Satan is moving into my house. What is that? That means the Mashiach ben Yosef is now going into or living together with, in the same apartment as the Satan himself. You see, that's called, he entered the klipa itself. He didn't have that before. His shorish is connected, his root soul is connected to the root soul of the Satan. That means his drive becomes super. Right, he's no longer an average person. Wow, you know what that did to my drives? It made it unbelievably difficult to survive. That's what the Mashiach ben Yosef apparently did. And therefore, when he resists the Satan, he can draw out an enormous amount of sparks, because his root is connected to the root of the Satan. Now, we don't even know what that means. What does it mean to be subject to the urges and drives of the Satan himself? You see, we don't know. You see, that's what the Mashiach ben Yosef did. You see, so, and that's, by the way, because of that faltering, you now understand how did the Malach hit him in the hip. That means he had to fail. Because if you fail, he can hit you. But if you are successful totally, he can't touch you. So the question is, how did he hit him in the hip? You ever wonder? And the answer is because that was the gaiva that he fought. To move away, no, it's not me. It's all the chesed of the Ribono Shel Olam. You see? But because he faltered for whatever, we don't really understand in what way that was. The Satan was able to hit him in the hip. And the hip is what? Right? Is the foundation of a man. You see? And so on. It's the Yisoid. He was able to hit him there because Yaakov did falter for a drop. And therefore, that was a Pesach of the Satan to say, you see? He deserves to be injured somewhat. And he was able to do that. Because the Messianic nishama has to come down, right? Through tumah, you see. Because that is its relationship being in the klipa. In any case, in that society, who's going to last in that society? You see? So it's all filled with chet and tumah and so on. Why? Because Moshe Rabbeinu is Mashiach ben Yosef. That's why. Moshe Rabbeinu, where was he born? He was born basically in Paro's palace. In fact, he grew up in Paro's palace, right? Could you imagine walking around Paro's palace? How they're dressed, what their values are, the Avodah Zarah, and he's got to maintain himself. You have an idea how difficult that is? He's not with Amram and Yocheved, learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. So he's got to survive all that tumah, zima, you see, taiva, living there. And then he has to run away. He had no Jews. So he's alone and becomes whatever, the king of Ethiopia, the general of Ethiopia. What do you think, these people are tzaddikim? They're all tumah, all values. It's all promiscuous, everything. And he's got to be in that society. Who's going to last in that society? You see? So it's all filled with chet and tumah and so on. Why? Because Moshe Rabbeinu is Mashiach ben Yosef. That's why, you see. Because the Mashiach is always involved, since he's in the entry of tumah, he's in the klipa. He's always involved in the appearance of chet, you see. And it's also a way to fool the Satan, because the Satan says, well, if he's in my grasp, forget about him, I don't have to worry about him. Whatever, getting into that and so on, you know. I had mentioned what the Asurin is basically, is what? That he can't learn. Now you understand why. Why can't he learn? I quoted the Neflois HaYehudi, right? He forgets every day. Why? Because he's in the klipa. And the Satan denies him access to the Torah in an abnormal way, in a super way. That's why. So that's his first Yisurin, suffering. His other Yisurin, right, is tremendous drives, which is what Yosef has. You see? But the real Yisurin, and this is what in many ways is terrible. You know, it's one thing to have drives to do sin. That's one thing. It's one thing to have tremendous drives to sin, tremendous taiva, you see, to sin with whoever and so on, right? But what the Yisurin of Mashiach ben Yosef is much worse than that. You know why? Because not only does he have an abnormal drive to sin, he has an abnormal drive to be a kodesh. That's the killer. Could you imagine, like I said, a person that has the neshama of an unbelievable kodesh, holy man, and he has the neshama of an unbelievable baltaiva or Russia? How do you exist in the same body? Who it can give tahara, purity, from tumah? Who's the only one? How can you extract purity from tumah, from defilement? Only God can do that. You see? That's exactly refers to the Mashiach ben Yosef. He takes tahara because he's in the klipa. So even though he's in tumah, but he can come out being toho. And now you understand one of the secrets of the paraduma. The paraduma is who? It's a para, which is a symbol of Yosef. Who is the paraduma? The paraduma is Mashiach ben Yosef, and he's red. He's tumah. Yet from him you can become toho. So the one who uses the Mashiach ben Yosef himself is red. He's tumah. But from him comes unbelievable tahara, right? Kedusha for the Jewish people. Now you understand and what that does to you, you see? So we now understand that not only is the inability to learn Torah, right? Then there's the fact that the Mashiach ben Yosef, the real one, is associated with chet, you see, in many ways an abnormal nature, you see? Because the Mashiach ben Yosef was mechadish, an unbelievable new avodah, a new service, where the Satan has now become internal to the universe. That's one thing, and I mentioned what that means. But we now understand what Mashiach ben Yosef asked for. He introduced a whole different methodology. Moshe Rabbeinu, there's a medrash that says the following. There was a king that heard about Egypt and what Moshe Rabbeinu did with Klal Yisrael, okay? And there's a certain discipline called physiognomy. That means by the shape of your forehead and your skull. It's not really proven to be anything, but it's certainly a discipline that ancients used to have, that they could tell by your skull what your characteristic is. and what your essence is. So this king, he was very curious. Moshe Rabbeinu, prophecy and all that, he must have an unbelievable face. So he sent an artist. I want you to draw. Please go to the Jews and ask Moshe Rabbeinu, I want you to draw. I wish we could have that picture, you know. And he drew Moshe Rabbeinu, right? Moshe Rabbeinu allowed it, whatever. And he went back to the king. So these guys who know physiognomy, whatever it's called, and so on, they studied the picture. They said it's impossible to be Moshe Rabbeinu. Why? Because the face of this person is incredibly evil. Not only is it evil, terrible midas, terrible characteristics. And that can't be Moshe Rabbeinu. So the king said to the artist, don't do this again. Go back and draw his picture. He did, you see. But he took a look at Moshe Rabbeinu. And he said, Moshe Rabbeinu said, what are you doing this again for? He says, because they don't believe this is your picture. Because this is the picture of an evil person based on your shape of your forehead and all that. So Moshe Rabbeinu told him an incredible thing. And we begin to understand what it means to be in the Klippa. He says, yeah, that is who I am. I was born with that tendency about Gaiva, about Taiva, you name it. All right? And not only that, but I lived amongst all these people. But I worked on myself tremendously. What does that tell you? And therefore, my picture does not resemble who I am, because I changed my entire character structure, even though my facial structure remains the same. To be in a terrible situation with tremendous proclivities, tendencies, inclination to sin, and to be involved in sinning. And you draw out so much more energy, and that will ultimately allow the Jews. And besides that, the suffering that you have to go through to survive in that environment. Okay, behold, my servant will succeed. Who is my servant? Who is the servant? So it says, it refers to Malka Mashiach, the Mashiach, not the Jewish people. And the Ramban says this, and so on. And in any case, that's what it says, that someday he will grow. What does that mean, he will grow? That means he's been subjected to terrible afflictions, and therefore he will finally succeed. That'll begin to tell you what's happened before. And I once said what this means, that the Mashiach ben Yosef himself, he will be exalted. So the Medrash asks, what does exalted mean? From who? He will be more exalted than Avram Avinu. He will be greater than Avram Avinu. Then the next thing, and he will become high, right? He will be greater than Moshe Rabbeinu. This is Mashiach ben Yosef, by the way. And exceedingly lofty, he will be greater than the Malachim. Wow, boy, did he journey far, and so on. In other words, he comes from within the Klippa, being subjected to such horrible suffering, right? Abnormal suffering, but this is what he ends up with. You see, in fact, what is interesting, without going into Pratim, is that there's a Medrash, Yalkut Shimoni, that says that the Avos, Moshe Rabbeinu, Aaron HaKohen, Shmuel HaNavi, all of them come to the Mashiach ben Ephraim, he calls, that's Mashiach ben Yosef, and they say to him, you are greater than us, because you were soivel, unbelievable Yisurin, by being in the Klippa, by greater than us. And it says that Moshe is going to reward him with something which you cannot even imagine, so on. But this is what it says, that he will become this. But before that, he wasn't. But look what it says, you see, and then it says, and as multitudes were astonished over you, over who? Over the Mashiach. Multitudes were astonished over the Mashiach ben Yosef, saying that indeed his appearance, remember we're going to the Targum Yonason, that it refers to Mashiach. Indeed his appearance is too marred to be a man. It's terrible. This guy looks terrible. You see, that's what they're saying about the Mashiach. And his visage, his appearance, right, to be human. It can't even be human. What are they talking about? So then it says, so will the many nations, exclaim, And they're all shut up. So we can't believe this guy's the Mashiach ben Yosef. Are you kidding? You see? Because they're seeing something they never saw. He's the last guy that anybody would think is the Mashiach. That's how bad his suffering is. The nations of the world cannot believe, with all this anti-Semitism and the thousands of years of torture and all that, you, Israel, are the chosen of God? We can't believe this. You're nothing. I don't want to repeat the words that they call, the Jewish people and so on, what they think of Jews and so on. But this refers to Mashiach ben Yosef, according to the Targum. So the question is, wait a minute, why does he look this way? That nobody would suspect. Why are they astonished at looking at this guy? You see? Because of what he went through. That's why. Clearly, that he's been involved in Chatoim. In fact, I want to tell you something. You know where you see this? When the brothers came to Egypt, I want to tell you this medrash. The brothers come to Egypt. You know what one of their kavanas is? To find Yosef. Right. Because they weren't in Egypt all the years since Yosef got, which is 13 years ago, kidnapped and all that. So one of the things they wanted to do is find Yosef. Do you know where they looked? In houses of prostitution. That's where they looked. Why? Because they knew nobody could survive the temptations of Egypt. Can't survive this. Egypt is a land filled with promiscuity, licentiousness and so on, How can he be a kidnapped person that we're looking for in houses of prostitution, right? How can he wind up being the Grand Vizier? That is impossible. And that's why when Yosef reveals himself, what does he say? Ani Yosef, I'm Yosef. And they were shocked. Not only because he was alive, because how in the world did you survive the temptations of Egypt? Why are you not a Russia? You see? Why are you not like Esav? I'm the same Yosef that you sold. Tzaddik. Even though you thought I was bad because I sinned, I spoke Lashon Hara about you, whatever, but I'm Yosef. They could not believe it. They were astonished. That's a very important idea. And that's why these people are astonished at the Mashiach ben Yosef. And this pasuk also refers to Mashiach ben David. Both Mashiachim are subject to this, you see. And that's why people are astonished. How could you be the Messiah? And so on, so forth, Difficult to be in. Anyway, so this basically concludes the ideas of the sufferings of the Mashiach ben Yosef. It's very interesting. But what's interesting is that it is so difficult to be in the klipa, into the environment of the Satan himself, that the Shekhinah has to follow the neshama of Yosef or the neshama of David, whatever, into it, or else he cannot survive, which is very, very interesting. But thank God it does. The Mashiach is also in the Shekhinah is in Galus, the divine presence in Galus, and therefore not only does he survive, but take a look at Yeshaya, he will succeed. And guess what? When he leaves, when Mashiach ben Yosef will leave the klipa, which he will, because that's what it means, he will be exalted and so on, then guess what? All the Jewish people also will leave the klipa, right? That is the great turnaround that we are waiting for. And that challenge is evil. That is actually an opposing ideology, an opposing force that you could actually feel, that in some way wants you to skip the good.
And what I'm seeing is like you in a dark room. There's like outlines of things, like the bed, the dresser, the door. There's outlines, but it's all dark. And you sitting in this room, and you're just a light. It's almost giving, if you've ever seen an ascended master, they're all light. Their eyes are light. Their skin is light. The robes that they wear are light. They look, I don't know how to explain it. If you've seen the ascended masters, you know what I'm talking about. And oftentimes they will appear with a certain humanoid, they will come to you and appear in a certain humanoid form, so they're easier to perceive and less upsetting or terrifying to you. How did I know that? Because I've seen them. If you've seen them, those are ascended beings. Because instead they studied you. Instead they targeted you to see what would happen, instead of taking you out when you were at your weakest. And now these individuals are regretting that decision because nothing is having an effect on you. Nothing is happening to you in the way that it normally happens to others, and it seems like they can't stop you, which has them in a panic, an uproar and a panic. But that was divinely intended through this organic augmentation you went through. These organizations, networks, and societies have seen this, and they didn't know this was possible. They didn't know it was possible for the vessel to be able to hold this much divinity, to be able to do what you've been able to do. And not only that, but you have this intense, immense divine connection to the ethers. You are moving as this, I just heard angelic enforcer. You are moving as this angelic enforcer that these elites were not prepared for. So again, if you have a platform, yes, they are targeting you, especially as a truth speaker and a divinely augmented angelic enforcer, because of the system that you were breaking down that they built their foundations upon. And this is what we're getting into. Their underworldly augmentations cannot compete to your organic divine one. Body couldn't keep up with what you had just done. So that the mothers that had lifted the car off their children, all of a sudden their body reacted poorly, where they weren't only sore, they could not move for days because, yep, it crashes, where yours doesn't. That's the craziest part of this, is where they're monitoring your energy and they see that with your key, with this supernatural augmentation, it stays permanent. You are consistently in this energy where you were able to do supernatural, superhuman feats. This is something, again, in order for them to maintain, they consistently have to consume this. And again, normal bodies, normal vessels are not able to keep up with this type of augmentation permanently. Don't want the top heads to know that they can't handle you, because then they would be the ones that receive the consequences for letting something like this happen when they had the chance to end you before you went through this type of level up. So I am getting like the heads of this don't know. They're trying to keep this from those that are the leads. Normal bodies would crash, there would be a negative response, but you've been trained for this. Maintaining this supernatural, these supernatural feats that you were able to accomplish daily, where you did not have a master to teach you. Like, you did not have a teacher for this other than the divine. You were able to accomplish this without an outside energy walking you through the steps to get to this level. And again, this level has not been reached before. You are able to maintain supernatural, superhuman energy permanently, daily. And this is why these individuals are attempting to wage war on you, as well as disconnect you from the divine, because you hold too much information. Sources exposing way too much information, as well as walking you through, we got love. They know that God loves you, of course, but this is like the love of the divine that you hold within your being. God is showing you the way to level up. It didn't happen to you, it happened for you. Your experiences prepared your vessel to hold this much divinity. Again, I'm hearing transfiguration, something these individuals have been unable to do for lifetimes, and they've been doing tests, they've been studying, they've been experimenting, trying to see how much the human body can hold, what would be required for them to maintain this level permanently. And a lot of these celebrity energies, the reason they are so alluring, the reason why they look like they're so young, the reason why they look like they don't age, the reason why they're able to upkeep within this lifestyle they have obtained, is because of this essence that they're consuming. But again, it is limited, which is why you will see some of these energies not only get hit by karma with the judgment that has been called upon them, but look like they're starting to deteriorate, and then all of a sudden they'll come back and they're glowing and they look healthy and they're even more attractive and alluring than before. And it's meant to last certain weeks, months, not long enough now, because it's no longer reaching the heights that it was. They're deteriorating at a rapid pace. And this is another reason why we are being targeted. This is another reason why we're being targeted. We have infiltrated, energetically infiltrated, and are keeping they are sick monsters, yes indeed. And we are keeping them from being able to hold on to this essence they perceive themselves as acquiring. And the reason I say perceive themselves is because they feel like once they have this essence, they'll be able to hold on to it for the period of time previously. But within days, it's gone. And again, more and more intuitives are speaking out of, you are a genius and you're about to, these individuals are staring at you. They're watching you going, how the fuck did they know this? Do they know this? How did they do this? How did they not only go through this augmentation that normally occurs when somebody is in a dire situation, but how did they maintain it? Not only that, but every time we attempt to impede upon them, how is it that every time we do something exactly going beast mode, Super Saiyan, how is it every time we attempt to influence or affect this individual, it comes back with a force? Return to sender of intent and entities while you hold the divine sovereign right and power to alchemize this energy. But they're watching you gobsmacked right now as they're bracing themselves for the return of something massive they work together to do. The energies that you are leading into the true. But you're going to see more information be declassified. You're going to see more intuitive speaking on what these dark underworldly individuals do to augment themselves. Why they use it. It's not just for pleasure. They're not out here doing these weird giggity ritual, giggity parties and rituals for no reason. They're not just out here doing this for pleasure. I feel like some of these individuals don't genuinely like having to consume this essence, but they do it because of the benefits. Yep, as a divine decoder and divine planetary reprogrammer. So what these individuals have to stoop to underworldly levels to acquire, you have naturally walked into. You have naturally had activated and augmented within you. Different branches all over the world in order to maintain control, and it's more along the lines of every man for himself. These individuals, they want to be seen as the most powerful organization, network, in society. So the fact that they are all working together means that you are a fucking problem. You are a massive problem. Going through. And again, they are bracing themselves for utter annihilation as the angelic enforcer that you are. Calling judgment on these individuals. We are in spiritual court with these individuals, and not only that, you have upgraded. You have gone from like a sacred sergeant to an enforcer, and you are enforcing divine law. These individuals, if they do not abide by divine law, they will be annihilated. They will be, I almost said divided. They have nothing and no one. Being stripped of everything that made them the perceived powerhouses they are today. And the divine's not playing. I can feel the anger. I can feel that the divine is like, I told you. I gave you choice. And you chose to do this. You chose to be this. You chose the underworldly order. Divine law is not, it's not something you can tiptoe around. Law. And they came up against a sacred soul sergeant that has been leveled up to an enforcer. This may be why you are moving more militant, because your rank has changed. This more militant type of energy is because you can feel your divine rank is different. You can feel that you went from just being a messenger, just being a sacred soul traveler here, an energetic architect, and a master alchemist to an enforcer of divine law. They're not only enticed by it, but it's like they automatically, naturally respect it. They want to listen to you. Your words hold weight, and it is impacting the world. You have completely broken out of the box of ascended expectations, which means that these individuals that had certain documentation do not have any documentation on how to handle you. They have not studied, been able to monitor or experiment on something like you. They have no information. They have no knowledge on what you are, how this was possible, and what level you are currently on. Because again, we talked about this before. If all they've studied is level 20, you've reached like level 50 and beyond. They don't have any information, any classified information on how to handle somebody that has ascended to the heights of transfiguration. Star Aquarius energy, I know. Then Taurus, I have. Virgo, I analyze. South Node, life's debts and stability. These individuals that got creative only for the love of the divine to step in and the love that you hold within your being, assisting in the alchemization of the lower vibrational, hateful, spiteful energy that was directed your way. So there are spiritual hitmen, practitioners out here, very well known, very well paid, that now realize this was the biggest mistake of their life. These individuals that are recognized and known, working in partnerships in order to disrupt what you were stabilizing on this planet. They're going to be the last one, and they're going to have to look around and leave this world with regret in their hearts for the fact that they targeted you. And none of this would have happened if they had just left you alone. None of this would have happened if they had taken the chance that God had given them to be better, to do better. But instead, they chose the path of the underworldly order. There's no one that can save them. No practitioner, no healer, no being on this planet. Does not matter what they specialize in. No being on this planet can save them. Wow. The divine does not play. That's some serious business right there. You know that you're able to do very supernatural, superhuman things. And you're able to do them every day. You have gone through a near-death experience, or you died and you came back. Or you died and a walk-in took your place, where these walk-ins, we as walk-ins are more spiritually advanced than the previous soul that had been positioned within this body. But a divine contract had been made between the two souls that if one were to fail, the other one would walk in and finish the mission. So whatever it is that you've experienced that has led you to this augmentation, it was not easy. And the amount of abuse that you experienced that had been placed upon you at a very young age prepared your vessel to intake this much energy. Then again, those that had abused you within your previous years have also experienced judgment. God saw everything. And even though it was a part of the plan, these individuals' intentions are what led them to the experience they're having now, because their intentions were of hatred, malice, evil. I heard sadistic and sociopathic. Sadistic individuals that you had incarnated into, or reincarnated or incarnated within this realm to experience for the type of augmentation you needed to be prepared for. But again, these individuals had a choice, and their choices lead to consequences. And this has led to your intuition being enhanced. You are deemed a leader, where this is only going to add to this leadership position you've been placed in with how many you are meant to inspire, influence, and impact. With power of attraction, not only are you attracting in or exuding more energy that is calling in more individuals that need to hear these messages and experience these activations, but you have, with the way that some of these organizations, networks, and societies specialize in manipulating reality, while using outside energy to manipulate reality to acquire. Not only using this essence, but using this essence with corrupted reality manipulation tools, pulling in things that they desired to acquire through making deals and participating in sacrificial rituals. So it's like you have the potential to be able to manifest and acquire, with the timeline that you can pull in, riches. And I know that none of us are greedy, none of us really care about money, but this is an example of how powerful you are and what you're able to attract. You got groups separating. They're already seeing their fate. That it will not be quick. It will be slow. It will be painful. And not only have they been shown this, so have you. Or maybe these individuals have been shown through the fact that they have attempted to break into your gifts, but then saw what they didn't want to see. And it was their own demise. All eyes are looking out for you. Focus on the light, because you are the light in their lives. You are what leads them to the light and frees them. It's like you yourself are heaven on earth. And it's almost like they can move into source with the assistance that they're giving to you and how you are freeing them and are a gateway to the divine. I'm almost seeing like ancestors walking into the light, but the light is you. something about this connection, when they have, this is interesting, when they make this certain connection with you, when they're ready to go, when things are completed, like business has been finished, unfinished business is finished, you are the light that they walk through. You lead them back to source. You are a direct extension of source. They go through you. You are the light in the dark. So not only are you being protected because of the light and the heaven that you bring here, but because of the divine portal that you are. How you've moved so many ancestors into source. That is so cool.